So who are you?
My name is Justin Santa Barbara. I'm the founder of FathomDB.
Yeah.
FathomDB offers relational databases as a service on the cloud. We're talking about Amazon's cloud and Rackspace's cloud servers. We launched on Rackspace cloud servers really recently, and that's going great.
What do you see happening in the world of databases, especially now that so many businesses are building businesses on cloud servers like Amazon and Rackspace Cloud?
Right. I mean, well, I think probably the biggest news over the last 5 years for databases is the NoSQL movement and the rise of these alternate databases. And
could you explain what the NoSQL movement is? Because I'm sure some people have heard, most people who listen to us have heard of it, but maybe don't know what that movement is.
Okay, well, it's not necessarily a single coherent movement, but I think the fundamental idea is to essentially re-examine the relational database as the de facto store of data. So for the past 20 or 30 years, if you were building an application, you put your data into a relational database. And there are quite good reasons for that. But I think a lot of people are experiencing, a lot of Web 2.0 people in particular, are experiencing much bigger data volumes than we've seen before, and are looking at alternate technologies that make different trade-offs from what we've seen before to try to get around some.
So are you talking about like Cassandra?
Cassandra is a great example of one.
Because obviously Facebook has 350 million users, probably actually more users than they're admitting to, and there's a high degree of volume of each of those users, and it's not in a structured format that a relational database would really help you, right?
Right, exactly. So the big things that NoSQL tries to address are things like the unstructured data. And if you have 350 million users that are doing Facebook status updates, it doesn't really matter if a couple of those go missing. If you're a bank and a couple of account withdrawals go missing or account deposits go missing, it's a much bigger deal. Yeah. So these are different trade-offs than have typically been made.
And what we mean by go missing is it might not get posted right away, right? A bank needs to know that transaction got posted now and is rollbackable and trackable and all sorts of stuff, right? Because it's money involved, right? If my Twitter status update shows up in 10 seconds or 15 seconds, it doesn't really matter.
Well, that's one degree of the trade-off, but you can also make the trade-off that rights don't have to be durable. So yes, if you have 350 million users, I'm sure that they drop a lot of status updates, like if you look at the numbers.
Wow.
But it doesn't matter because a lot of people, when you look at your wall, the stream, that isn't necessarily guaranteed to be the latest posts of everyone. Yeah. So a lot of Twitter scaling difficulties were because they didn't make that trade-off. Yeah. Now, we don't prescribe to the NoSQL movement because we think rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater and abandoning all this technology that we've built up over the past 30 years, we can probably do a better job with what we already have and maybe have databases that offer some of those same trade-offs. So for example, you can have a SQL database that might accept data latency, so it takes 10 seconds to post, or might even accept lost data if you're willing to accept that. And the NoSQL movement is sort of trying to reinvent everything. And right now it's a little bit young, and to use those databases is hard work. Yeah. And we think that relational databases are very good. The most important lesson to learn from the NoSQL databases is that people want databases that work and are easy, and where their data is safe. And that's basically what we're trying to do at FathomDB, but instead of throwing away everything that we've learned over the past 30 years, we're trying to just take the existing tools and build them up to the point where they will deliver the requirements that people are looking for.
So what's different from FathomDB and maybe some of the other players in the space versus putting MySQL on a computer and building it the old style? What's different about
Definitely.
FathomDB?
So I mean, it's pretty easy to apt-get install MySQL, or double-click on the installer package and install a database. But that's just the beginning. You have to. The hard bit is keeping that database running, and making sure that your data is safe and is backed up. And we've seen some pretty big disasters recently where people have lost data. So like Microsoft and the Danger, the Sidekick thing, where they lost their backups, and Jeff Atwood's blog where he didn't have backups and had to restore it from the internet, for example.
Yeah.
So those are some pretty big disasters where failure to keep a good database backup caused problems.
That happens because of cost, right? Because really, you and I know that if we're really going to back something up, we need the data here, we need it somewhere else,
right,
on another hard drive, and then we need the data somewhere else yet again. Because for instance, if we had a computer here and the hard drive crashed, we need another copy on another hard drive somewhere else. And if this house burns down, we need the data outside this house somewhere. So 3 copies.
Absolutely, and you also have to be able to...
And that's expensive.
It's not just cost, though. It's also, I think a lot of the things that we've seen go wrong have not been cost-driven. They've more been about, it's actually quite hard. It's not easy to back up a database, or it's not drop dead easy to back up a database.
Certainly not when the database is changing so fast, right? With Twitter and Facebook and Flickr.
That's true. And if you're willing to stop the database for an hour and take a backup of it, then it's very easy to back up a database.
Yeah.
It's a little bit harder to do if you're not willing to stop the database. And most people are not willing to stop the database because it's a bad idea. So you introduce a little bit of a more complicated procedure. It probably doesn't help that the MySQL live backup thing used to be, or is still to this day, a commercial product. So it's difficult to do from that point of view. And then you also have to test that your backup actually works. And all of these things are ways to go wrong, and other things get prioritized.
Yeah.
And it's a failure of prioritization. It's that most people, most programmers don't want to go to DBA school and learn how to do this boring stuff. So we think they should leave it to us. But what we're basically doing is we're packaging that know-how, the best practice, and delivering it as a service. So you don't have to learn how to do this, and you don't have to worry about it.
So if I use FathomDB, you automatically, you've backed it up for me?
Yes, so we back up your database basically continuously. Every 5 minutes we back up your transaction logs, and we're able to restore it should something go wrong. And we do we do a daily full backup.
Okay.
So yeah, basically we take care of the backups for you. There's some clever technology going on behind the scenes, but you don't really need to worry about it. You just know that your data is safe. So we back it up to Amazon's S3 if you're on Amazon, or Rackspace's Cloud Files if you're on Rackspace.
Interesting.
So they each do multiple data centers and data distributions. So you don't even have to rely on us storing your backup for you, as it were. You know that fundamentally it's stored by one of the cloud players' redundant storage.
Yeah. A lot of entrepreneurs, especially if they're starting small, out of college or whatnot, starting a company, they want to know if they choose a system like FathomDB, they want to know that in the future, if they get to be a Twitter,
right,
which is the pipe dream, but some of them will, right? That they can move off of your systems and onto their own systems.
Absolutely.
Where they can have control, or if they get purchased by Google or Microsoft, that they can move off of your systems and into the Microsoft or Google infrastructure. YouTube started at Rackspace, right? It was hosted at Rackspace. When they got sold to Google, they moved all that infrastructure into Google's data centers.
I think that's a really important thing to worry about from every level of your stack. So at every level you should be thinking about avoiding lock-in, whether it's because for acquisition reasons or just because I think it's fundamentally sound to not be reliant on or not be locked into a single provider.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons, again, why we think, don't go with these weird NoSQL databases, but use MySQL, which everyone is pretty familiar with. You have libraries for it. We offer standard MySQL. You have your standard database backups. You can restore them onto your own laptop if you want to, so you know full well that you can bring up your database on your own. Because you can run on your laptop, you can run on your own server, you can do whatever you want with it.
Got it.
So there's zero lock-in into FathomDB.
Who else is is a competitor of FathomDB then? Amazon has their service. Are they offering that no lock-in ability, or are they doing their own thing?
Amazon are less transparent over the exact nature of their lock-in, but certainly you're locked into Amazon's you're locked into Amazon's cloud in that they're not offering their service on multiple clouds.
Right.
So if you can stick with FathomDB and move from Amazon's cloud to Rackspace's cloud if you decide to make that sound choice.
Okay.
But Amazon have also built a slightly customized version of MySQL, and again, they're not very transparent about it. But fundamentally, I think Amazon's product does recognize the value of standard MySQL. And if there is lock-in, I would imagine it's not terribly significant.
Yeah.
That's the hope, though Amazon always have a way of putting a little fly in the ointment. So we'll have to see.
One problem with clouds is you're not in control, right? Your stuff is stored on some other machine.
The illusion of control.
Right, and you're right. So you don't know the performance of that machine. The cloud could get impacted if everybody is down, or like we're seeing problems with cloud hosting, not just Rackspace but Amazon. That there's performance issues once in a while. So how does FathomDB handle the new cloud realities, which is separate from managing your own data center and knowing that that machine is running and is only running that database, and so you can track that machine very cleanly. Of course you have to pay somebody to do that, where on cloud you don't, but it's different, right? It's a different environment.
I mean, there's always someone responsible for the machine, and the idea of cloud is that maybe you don't want to learn and take the responsibility of running your own machines, because hopefully Rackspace or Amazon or other cloud players can do it better because they can do it at scale. Yeah. There's a secondary issue, which is one of transparency. So I think it's important when your service is failing that you admit that your service is failing, and that you put an accurate status update on your status page. And I think that's something which certainly the new cloud players are much better at and are recognizing.
Rackspace does that, and we also use Twitter, so if we're down. The hard part, though, is when only a small percentage of customers is down. How do we let everybody know that this guy's down but not everybody else?
Exactly.
It's really a hard job to be transparent of what's going on in the data center, because we have tens of thousands of customers on thousands of machines,
right?
And some of them might be down, some of them might not.
And it's also difficult because you want to leave the management to your cloud provider. That's sort of what you're signing up for, and it's something we face as well with FathomDB. So if if MySQL crashes, we can bring it back up. Now the question is, do you want to be told every time that happens? Do you want to get an email, or do you want to just not know about it and just let us take care of it and recover it for you? And that's something we're still trying to, I think everyone's trying to figure out, what's the correct trade-off between I want you to just fix it and I want you to let me know and have me approve every fix you do type things.
Yeah. And we were at Nimsoft, who's building not a management dashboard, but a status dashboard that because it's not just Rackspace or Amazon anymore, right? It's all of these APIs that your application uses. Is it using the Foursquare API or the Twitter API or the Flickr API or XYZ API?
So being able to tell whether they're up and running.
Up and running, and then once you have that data, how do you fail over to something else, or at least provide a nice page? Hey, this part of the app is down, and come back in 10 minutes, and we'll probably be back up.
And yes, it's transparency that will get us through this. Yeah. One of the things that we offer with FathomDB is we offer dedicated. Each customer gets their own MySQL instance, their own dedicated server. Okay. So I think the idea of being able to say to customers, this is your level of performance. So you have a slice of this size, and it is entirely your slice.
Yeah.
I think that's important. And I think, with some of the shared hosting providers, the big ones that oversell, you don't really have those guarantees, and you never really understand. And maybe you shouldn't have to build these complicated monitoring tools that monitor every little piece of your infrastructure.
Yeah.
In the ideal world, everything would just work. Now, obviously, we're not in that ideal world.
No, it's the internet. Come on.
But we can at least try to offer some transparency as to what we're trying to deliver, rather than, on some like Amazon's cloud, for example, with this ping latency issue that's arisen over the last week.
Yeah.
There's the first issue, which is that there's high ping latency, and there's the second issue, which is that no one knows whether that's acceptable or not acceptable, because Amazon haven't defined it and no one ever raised it. But this is the sort of thing which we need to be clearer on.
Yeah.
Amazon should say, no, it's not acceptable, or yes, this is how it's going to be. Get used to it.
If you're building a global brand, and you're an entrepreneur, maybe going to Y Combinator or whatnot, and trying to build a company that goes global, how do I make sure that my service works in India and Dallas and New York and Paris the same way, with the same performance? Because obviously, if I'm hosting my data center at Rackspace, we have data centers in Dallas or Chicago or Virginia.
Right.
that's not in India. I know my answer, but I want to hear your answer. How do I make sure that database is reachable with a good first-class service all over the world?
It's a very difficult problem, the distributed database problem. And I think when certain customers get to that scale, they have to deal with it. And for example, I think Facebook was very big before they introduced their second data center on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And I think, when you get to that level, you have to find an approach that works for your application, and Facebook's approach is completely custom. I mean, there are sort of easier ways to do it. So if your business is completely isolated, you can have, or if your websites are completely isolated, you can have an Indian version of your website that is based in India. You can have a Chinese version that's based in China. Yeah. You can have a European version that's based somewhere in Europe, and an American version, South American version. That's an easy approach. The more complicated bit is when you have multiple data centers and you want them to communicate and have one view of the website. So for example, Facebook, I can have friends everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets harder. It's not, you can still have one website present. So you could have a single data center, single master data center in Dallas, for example, and you can use content delivery networks to bring your data rapidly, or to bring a lot of your content rapidly to customers anywhere in the world. But yeah, fundamentally, it's a very difficult problem, and one which we haven't really solved as an industry. There's no single best practice for it yet.
Does FathomDB offer the ability to have multiple databases around the world that each talk to each other and each federate?
Absolutely. I mean, we can set up replication for you, which is an approach. It probably is more trouble than it's worth for most sites. It's probably easier to optimize using a content delivery network like Rackspace's content delivery network, which is really nicely integrated. And there's a lot of low-hanging fruit before you need to get into the database distribution.
Yeah.
There are other reasons to replicate your database for failover type reasons, but in terms of global access, you don't necessarily need to get into that too early.
What are some mistakes or some architectural decisions that you wish more entrepreneurs made early rather than late?
I have a theory that you can only make one or two big technical decisions in your startup. So, for example, if you choose a really weird language like Erlang, that's one of your two. And if you also then choose a NoSQL database, then you're done, right? You're going to find it really hard to find people that know Erlang and your particular NoSQL database. And you're going to, if you're the biggest customer using these weird things, you're going to hit every problem first, and you're the guinea pig. And if you're used to that, and if you accept that, and that's your one decision, I've chosen Erlang because it's crucial to my business and it will let me compete with everyone, then that's fine. But if you're choosing it because it's the cool thing, then it's not the best idea. So I think the best idea is simply to just go with, standards where you can. Figure out what the one thing is that differentiates your business, and that's where you are willing to get funky.
Yeah.
But don't get funky on the basics. So from our point of view, it's don't get funky on the database unless the database is your thing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
For Twitter, maybe the database was their thing. They have this really difficult problem of subscribers and posts and how you do that. And for them, maybe the database was their thing. But they made the right move. They started off completely standard, so Rails and MySQL. And they had some growing pains, and they've basically now addressed them because they were able to introduce their weird thing, which is a different database architecture.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't get too crazy would be my architectural advice.
Where can we learn more about FathomDB?
FathomDB.com.
Okay.
Pretty easy.
Thank you so much for inviting me over to hear more about the world of bleeding edge databases.
Standard databases.
Standard and bleeding edge, right?
Standard databases on the cloud.
Yes, there you go. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.